let's talk about the top competitor now. Now, keep in mind, we're just giving you perspective here. We're just sort of setting the table, if you will. Putting down the placemats and the dishes, and we'll add in the forks and knives, and we'll actually start using them and showing you how to use these tools. But right now, we're literally just setting the table and just giving you just broad perspective. As a matter of fact, the next several sessions are going to be all perspective based. So just bear with us and just and pay attention here, because this is important stuff, because later on this is going to come back on how you apply to certain areas in the market, these categories. So the top competitor. Now, this is where you're looking at your number 2, your number 3 company. And I always like to use this example. If I were to ask you, cola, soda, what would be your first choice? What would come to mind first? Probably Coke, right? Maybe Pepsi. So Coke and Pepsi. If I said, okay, what's number 3 that comes to your mind? I don't know, maybe RC Cola, or you'd come up with something else. But as we go down, let's say, okay, who's number 4? Who's number 5? All of a sudden, you can't so readily come up with that. And you could do this with just about anything. If I said home improvement, you'd probably, right? Home Depot, Lowe's would come to mind, right? What's number 3? What's number 4? As you start getting to 3, 4, 5, 6, it just gets harder and harder to identify the leaders in that area, right? Same thing with, let's say, coffee. Coffee, you'd think of Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, right? Maybe if you're Canadian, Tim Hortons, right? But as you get to number 5, you start drawing a blank. So that's because, and in marketing they call it the law of duality, where it basically the market comes down to just a couple leaders in any one market space that dominate a space, and that's really how it works. In the stock market, the real true leaders are usually going to be, there's only going to be a handful of them in any one group. And then you get the laggard stocks. Now, on occasion, and we're going to show you this later on occasion, you can have the top competitor can actually leapfrog the market leader. This happened with Home Depot and Lowe's. If you go back and remember, Home Depot was the clear market leader. They really sort of defined that space with that home improvement. And then later on, they started to slip a bit. Their stores got a little bit dingy. They started to have a lot of builders, and it was getting to be more of a wholesale type environment. And then Lowe's took advantage of that, and they had the brighter stores and went more retail, and they actually did much better than Home Depot for a little while. So you can see this happen. But usually what will happen is, when you're coming off of a bear market, you're going into that new bull market, you'll get these names will move together. So you don't want to just look for just the only one name. There might be 2, 3, or 4 names in a group that are investable or tradable at least. And again, they're gonna lead in fundamentals. They're gonna lead in performance when you get with the market leaders. And these top competitors might lag a bit, but they're still going to be very good stocks to invest in during that period.
And I would also add that the third point in terms of top competitors move together in a strong group that you mentioned. Anytime I sort a list of stocks, I usually sort it by group strength. And so I'm always looking at the top on MarketSmith there's 198 groups. I look at the top 50 very closely, and I see what are the strongest groups in those 50, and I look at the strongest stocks within those groups. And so, as it says, lots of times when you get a strong group move, you're going to have some really great performance in the top few stocks within that group. So group strength is very, very important.
Now, sometimes you'll have a group like the semiconductor group, which is a very large group, and there's a lot of companies in the semiconductor group, and there's some groups like that have a big list of names in it, and you might get, there may be a good handful of names, or there's a lot more than just a few names, but generally speaking, your true leaders are going to be 1 or 2 or 3 names, and like I said, those are going to be your top competitors. Now, the institutional favorite, this is your name that right now, an institutional favorite, Dave, I guess Apple, Google, PayPal, what else are the names that they love? that the institutions can't get enough of right now.
Home Depot, Costco, Starbucks, those are always institutional favorites. They've been.
Yeah, these are going to be your big names, and these are what you would think of as a quality stock. These are the type of names that people say, oh, Coca-Cola is not going to go out of business, right? I'm safe with that. And we'll talk about that later as far as, safe. But you want to be careful, when a stock is the official growth stock and it's the quality leader, if you will, these are actually usually going from leader to laggard, because now, all the money's been moved into them and there's just nothing but supply. You've got thousands of mutual funds in there, where the market leader, sometimes you only have 50, 100 institutions in there. If you use a MarketSmith, and you can go in there and see the number of institutions that are in the stock and number of funds in there, there might be a very small number compared to, you look at Microsoft and there's thousands and thousands of funds in there. But there is an opportunity in this area too. All right, these are liquid names. These are the larger cap, sometimes mid, but usually large and mega cap. And these are very widely followed. Everybody knows them. All the analysts, follow them. Bear markets can provide really good opportunities in these. This is where you get a bear market, you might be looking to pick up an Amazon or some of these bigger names if they're meeting the proper criteria, and you can get a good move coming off of a bear market relative to the general market. But they tend to move with the market. They're more market type stocks, so they're going to go up when the S&P goes up, down when the S&P goes down. And this isn't this isn't your top area that you'll be looking for. You're really looking for the market leaders and the top competitors. But you're, like David said, you're going to throw in some of these institutional favorites, particularly coming off of a bear market. The turnaround situation. Now, this is where, again, you have to apply a few parameters a little bit differently on the turnaround situation. This is where you might get a company that fell on hard times, and we got a lot of turnaround situations in recent times after we've had the bear market from COVID and so forth. If you get a recession, you can have industries that fall on hard times, and now they're trying to recover their fundamentals. They're refocusing their business strategy, or maybe ridding losing operations. A new CEO, they might have a new CEO come in and turn things around. But the thing with these companies, you're going usually against what we call easy comps. So where a growth stock, you might look for 20-30% earnings might appear like that. That's pretty strong earnings. But with something that has been on very hard times and showing a bunch of losses, now in the most recent quarters, you're going to want to see huge earnings. 20-30% for a turnaround situation would not be very strong. You'd want to see triple digits in the earnings and sales in the most recent few quarters, margin improvements. So again, how we're going to approach these various areas are going to be a little bit different, not usually from the technicals as far as the charting is concerned, but on the fundamental side. Dave, anything to finish off here before we look at a few of these examples in each area?
Yeah, usually with turnarounds, you're going to have bad growth rates, but you're going to see that you really want to see one, if not two, very, very big, strong earnings, as you said, 100%, 150% improvement in those last two quarters. That's going to tell you, and along with a chart pattern and a relative strength that's improving, it's looking for those first two quarters of very strong earnings turn.